the cotton. You're just plain rotten.
Mississippi Goddamn, Nina Simone. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. As we go back to a clip of the new documentary, Neshoba, that is opening tonight at Cinema Village here in New York City. This features the footage of the funeral for James Chaney. It was August of 1964. It shows a young Ben Chaney crying as he signs "We Shall Overcome," and Corps Field Secretary Dave Dennis is speaking.
See, I know what's going to happen. I feel it deep in my heart when they find the people who killed those guys in Neshoba County. You got to come back to the state of Mississippi and have a jury, all their cousins, their aunts, their uncles. And I know what they're going to say, not guilty. I'm tired of that.
I had been asked by some people to do this eulogy, but keep it quiet. When I looked out there and saw little Ben, it didn't make sense to me.
Don't bow down anymore. Hold your heads up. We want our freedom now. I don't want to have to go to another memorial. I'm tired of funerals. I'm tired of it. Got to stand up.
That was Dave Dennis at the funeral of James Chaney. It was the beginning of August, just after their bodies had been dredged up. James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner. And we're joined by two of their brothers, Ben Chaney and Andrew Goodman. Ben, well, that was many years ago. There you were, a little boy. Talk about that day and what has happened since.
That was a very sad time. I guess it was a very painful time also. It was my first experience with death, knowing that death was final. And I guess since 46 years ago, that occurred like 4 years from the 50th anniversary of that event. So a lot has happened in 46 years. There's been a lot of changes made. There's been a lot of growing in this country that have taken place in 46 years. But at the same time, there's been some things that have remained the same. America, I feel, still needs to have a serious discussion about race. And for some particular reason, we're unable to do that. And we're headed 50 years from now.
You know, we got a call from Bill Moyer's office last night because he heard we were doing this interview. And he says he remembers this time, right? It was, I think, August 5th, 1964. He was working for Lyndon Johnson. And he was the one who received the call in the White House that your brother, James Chaney, that Andrew Goodman, David, your brother, that Michael Schwerner, that the bodies had been found. Andrew, how old were you? David, how old were you?
I was 17 years old at the time. And it was an experience that I wouldn't wish on anyone, a personal loss, but it was also an astonishing realization of what goes on in the world, in the country, is not necessarily what appears to go on. And I learned a lot in a unusual kind of way about all the things that I learned, all the things that I was told was right, didn't happen in this case. And when I look back at it, I realized how naive I was about what goes on in the world, and that there are people and places that call themselves Americans and Christians and then kill people and do un-American things. It was a shock to me, and how I was brought up was something that I just never realized.
Right.
Well, the amazing thing was that your brother had gone down as part of Freedom Summer, along with hundreds of other folks, and this was the first, actually the first day of Freedom Summer when they were abducted. And what do you recall? What he told you before he left, and what he was doing in Mississippi?
Well, actually, there was a training session in Ohio that about 700 young people went to, mainly college students. And something happened before they were intending to go to Mississippi, Arkansas, various places, that a church was burnt down. So they went to investigate it. James Chaney and Michael Schwerner had been in Mississippi, had set up offices there for CORE and Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And my brother was a volunteer, and they were looking for volunteers, and he volunteered to go with them and investigate it. So this was actually a couple of days before the intention of the start of the Mississippi Summer, Freedom Summer.
I think it was interesting because Andy was going to be in charge of the Neshoba County Freedom School. He was going to be working out of that church, and that's one reason why he was there, you know. Very interesting.
So your brother, James, he was the African-American civil rights worker. Andrew and Michael were white civil rights workers. How scared was James? And where did you grow up? Where did James grow up?
We grew up in Meridian, which is like 40-some miles from Philadelphia. How scared was Jay? I don't know how scared Jay was. He used to travel into Neshoba County at night at high speeds. He used to go into those areas. His job was to find places for freedom schools. So he would go to the outlying areas where heavy Klan concentrated areas. Cesar Price chased him a few times during that period. So how scared was he? I believe that if when you're 20, 21 years old, there's very little fear you have. I think he understood the danger. I think Micki understood the danger. Probably they both understood the danger much more than Andy did. But how scared were they? I don't believe that they had any fear. Well,
if you can, to talk a little bit about what life was like at the time, because I think most Americans are not aware when we talk about 60 still unsolved cases of murders during the civil rights era in the South, what the level of terror was as more and more African Americans began to demand their right to vote, and the response that they got from the white society. In some parts of the country, it was with people at war. That was very oppressive. The atmosphere of fear, you know, was strong in the air. It was very strong. And you had the Klan that would carry out this fear. And you had state governments like agencies like the Sovereignty Commission that would reinforce it. They legislated fear. They legislated discrimination. They enforced it through the laws of the state. So people, civil rights workers and those who supported civil rights workers had very little recourse. There was no one to protect them, but yet and still they still did the work. You know, I remember growing up in Mississippi at one point, my brother used to take me to get haircuts. And we used to have to get off the sidewalk when white people was coming down the sidewalk. You know, it was terrorizing there, Mississippi was in that period. So fear was really deep, but I think when you're young and you're strong and you're healthy, I don't believe those young people who was involved in the civil rights movement, the volunteers who went to Mississippi, those that were in Mississippi that was working, they understood the danger, but I believe that deep down inside, they believed that they were so smart, so courageous, so strong, they could avoid the real danger.
Micki Dickoff, why did you decide to do this film, Neshoba, The Price of Freedom?
In 1964, I was 17 years old, and I had wanted to go to Mississippi to register voters, and my father, who grew up in Mississippi, in a small town in the Mississippi Delta, and the only Jewish family in town, said, "You're not going." 6 weeks later, when those kids' bodies were found, it devastated me and haunted me my whole life and really helped shape my politics and my art. I didn't know that 35 years later I was going to get a phone call from Ben Chaney, who said, "Are you interested in making a film about these murders?" And I flew to New York and met Ben. And it took us a little bit longer than from 1999. We didn't really start shooting the film until 2004.